Hello everyone, this video is going to cover Module 8. So Module 8 is the halfway point of the semester. A couple of things to think about at this point. We are coming up on spring break, which means that you do get an extra week for the next module, so that you can have a spring break if you want. Also at the midpoint of the semester, you will do a reflection and you will also be thinking about your journal entries. You should have at least half of them done by this point. So Module 8 is also working toward the new genre that we're working on. So we're leaving short stories behind and we are starting poetry with Module 8. Poetry is much different from writing short stories. So if you've never written a poem before, these modules might be a little bit more challenging for you. Just like I've done before, this first module is kind of just an overview, getting you kind of into the genre, a little bit more about how to write it. And then the next couple of next couple of modules will cover the actual poetry assignments that you'll be writing. Poems can sometimes take a lot more time than short stories, kind of depending on your experience with poems. You might leave yourself more time to revise the poems that you write. Just kind of keep in mind that everybody's a little bit different. Some people will find it much more challenging, and for some people, poems just kind of come a little bit more naturally, and they end up not doing as much revising as they did for short stories. So the module is looks kind of like this. Let me get in student view. So the module will cover just kind of the overview stuff for poems and give you some resources to work with. And then you're also doing a poetry elements assignment, which is similar to the short story elements assignment that you did in the for the previous genre. And then the other thing that you're doing is the quiz. So those are kind of the two major things to work on, as well as looking at the midterm reflection, which since we're at the halfway point, that's why that's there. So our chapter, writing the poem, is all about the different elements of poetry, different things to think about. There is so much terminology when we talk about writing poems that sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming if you've never had to study them before. If you've taken a literature class, a lot of it will be review. Hopefully you'll kind of feel like it's familiar. It's different reading poems versus trying to write them though, because it's one thing to like be able to identify and scan a poem for rhyme and meter and things like that. It's another thing entirely to repeat that and try to figure it out on your own. So I do have a video here that just kind of gives you some basic step-by-step how to approach a poetry assignment, and this is one of those kind of lecture videos that I've done for my students, and something that if this was a face-to-face class, I would be covering that in a class. So that just kind of gives you an overview. I've got some resources here for you as well. The resources page is just videos, just kind of what makes poetry. Poetry can be a little bit more challenging because we are trying to create meaning out of a limited number of words. And so we don't have the space that a short story does to really expand on the plot and the character. Sometimes poems don't even have a plot or a character. The best poems are ones that make people think, but also ones where by the end, it is fairly clear what you are writing about. We might have some different interpretations, but they're not so vague or so poetic, so flowery that we don't have kind of a concrete idea to think about. And often that concrete idea actually appears in the title of the poem. So I've got a couple of videos for you, and I also have this video which is kind of fun. It is it's called Poetry and Its Relevance, and to access it, you go into the Films on Demand database. And so I've got a link here that you can click on that'll take you to the page, or you can log in here if you want, but you have to log in with your Allen username and password because it's through the libraries. It is related to the Poetry Elements assignment, which I'll explain in a minute. So there's your quiz, similar to what we've done before. There's actual points in the grade book. And then I've got your poetry collection listed here. You're going to write 4 poems again. We do have one fewer module than we did for the short stories though. So just kind of keep in mind the free verse and fixed form that you'll kind of be working on together. But they're sort of opposites in how you approach them. And they're in this order for a reason, mainly because mimicry kind of gives you, I think, a starting point. If you've never written a poem before, it's often easier to kind of mimic somebody else's. And then our free verse and fixed form poems are just types of poetry. And the fixed form in particular, depending on the form that you choose, might be really easy. A lot of students choose haiku, which has its own challenges, but they'll pick something kind of short is what they'll do. And then the author's choice poem is just kind of like with the short story. There's fewer restrictions on it. These will all open up here in a little while, probably by the time you watch this video. So the poetry elements assignment then is to just kind of get you started. It's not related to the poem assignments that you'll be completing. This is just to practice poetry elements. And I've got some links in here. This first one is probably one of my favorites, and that is, so you're doing 3 poems. This website allows you to just take these poetry magnets and just move them. And so you can just kind of, I'm not sure why butt boys on there. You can just move them until you get a poem, and it may not make any sense. You can just kind of, make your poem, and then it can make a shape if you want it. Some students will just take it. When you're done, you can't actually download it, unfortunately, but you can take a screenshot if you want, or you can just type it into your Word document is what you can turn it in on. So that's the first one. The second one is to we're practicing mimicry here. The I'm sorry, but is just a type of poem where you have an apology at the end. So this is William Carlos Williams' original, which is, he ate the plums and forgive me, they were so delicious, so sweet and so cold. So that kind of like twist at the end that, as I'm sorry, but they were actually really good. And then this last one here is for you to write a poem. It really doesn't matter what the topic is. I usually tell students, pick an object and like describe it, and then use the title as your object. And then that way the description doesn't actually use the word, the title does, and you can kind of play with the words a little bit. The idea is that you just write one poem now. So it's one poem, and the first version, actually it really doesn't matter what you go in, but one version is going to be really short, so like 1 to 3 words each line, and then the second version is going to be really long. So your first poem might be pretty long, and then the second version will be pretty short because you have really long lines. It's kind of up to you. You might do the long one first and see if it's easier. So you have like really long lines, and then you break them up. And see really choppy. It's just kind of fun to see what different line lengths do to a poem. So that is the poetry elements assignment. You'll do all 3 exercises, and those poems are not ones that you'll be using for the actual poems that you'll be writing later. And then the last thing that you'll do is this midterm reflection, and basically it's asking you if you're meeting your goals for the class, biggest takeaway, what do you need to be working on this for the rest of the semester, that kind of thing. If you were to give yourself a grade, what would it be? A lot of students write this midterm reflection as sort of a paragraph kind of essay form. Some students choose just to answer the questions in a bulleted list. It's up to you. The final reflection will ask you to do more of the essay form where you actually write out your thoughts in paragraphs. For the midpoint reflection, it's fine to do kind of a listed format. So those are the assignments that you'll be working on, and then the other poem modules will be opened up soon, because it's just like the short stories. You can work on those poems in any order, but they're kind of in an order for a reason, so they may be the order that you want to work on them. So hopefully you're doing well. Have a great week, and if you have any questions, make sure you send me an email.